Welcome back, everyone, and happy Grotsmas. We got a new detachment coming out here for the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militarum, and me, Joshua Jeffrey Howard. I'm going to take you through it and go over a couple different ways I think that we can actually play this out over the next couple of months, at least until our codex comes. So, let's go ahead and start off. We're just going to go through the normal thing and just take a look at everything that we have in here. So, we got Bridgehead Strike. This is the Scion detachment that we were kind of expecting was very likely to happen based on the fact that it was not listed anywhere in the codex, or at least the detachment they were leaking in the codex when they did their video at the World Championships of Warhammer. There's a pretty obvious things like, they didn't talk about Scions anywhere in here, and there is almost always a way to play the Tempestus Scions in pretty much every version of 40k since Scions have become a thing. So let's go ahead and talk about what we actually have in this. So, our detachment rule, we have lost the Born Soldiers lethal hits from the, regiment versus non-vehicles and squadron versus vehicles, and it has been replaced with a couple of different rules. So the first one, only the best. All of our infantry, whenever it shoots, rerolls a hit of 1. It's okay, right? Like, it is going to just increase the number of shots you're going to be hitting, but in general, because a lot of guard like las guns and other non-super special weapons are low strength, lethal hits was generally better for a lot of our infantry, including things like Hazarkin. Um, and basically, if you weren't shooting like a plasma or a melta, the lethal hits was you almost always just better. But this is okay. I have reason to believe, I have a very credible reason to believe that this is going to be a lot more relevant when our codex comes, based on what Science rules are going to be changing to. However, let's go ahead and talk about the next part of the rule. Fire Zone Purge. Each time a Militarum Tempestus model from your army makes a range attack in a turn in which it was set up on the battlefield from reserves or disembarked from a transport, add 1 to the wound roll. This is fantastic. So one of the major things about this change is, in terms of like napkin math, I would oftentimes say that lethal hits is about equal to +1 to wound, but this is mostly true. This is most accurate when you're going from wounding on 5s to wounding on 4s, where I think it is exactly equal. And otherwise, like if you're wounding on 3s to wounding on 2s, it is not as good as +1 to wound. And so, what this is really good for, it applies to our Scions and our Quillons and the Military Tempestus Command Squad. And what this does altogether is it just makes you kill everything, right? The major thing that this does is it hits a couple of major breakpoints. So, one, um, Plasma was typically wounding like Terminators and Custodes on 3s. Now we are wounding them on 2s unless they have some access to -1 to wound. Um, Even things like Sentinels or Nemesis Dread Knights or Rhinos, or not Rhinos, Rhinos are toughness 9, but there's like basically everything in the game, we are now going from wounding on 4s or 5s to wounding on 3s or 4s, or even wounding on 2s. So it just makes you hit everything. And this makes you really effective. So the biggest buff that this actually gives us is it means that our Tempestus Scion squads are not just able to just overkill infantry like they've always have been, and it would struggle against things that were like toughness 9 or higher. Now that's not nearly as much of an issue because our plasmas and our melters are going to be wounding Lehman Russes and Rhinos and everything else in the game on 4s or better. That's a really big deal. So suddenly our Scions are, like, they were already a fantastic damage piece, but they would mostly just kill marine bodies. Now they kill one of whatever they want, basically. The last thing that we get into the detachment rule is if a military Tempestus officer model from your army is your warlord, Tempestus Scions from your army gain battle line. And while such a unit is not battle shocked, add 1 to the OC of Tempestus Scion models in that unit. So this says a couple of things to me. One, I mean, it's pretty good. Battle line Scions are pretty cool, relevant for raised banners, relevant for swift action and stalwarts and all that cool nonsense. But the bigger thing, kind of reading into this, is that because this is listed here in this detachment, it means that this is probably not going to be true in any other detachment when our codex comes out, because why would it be here if it's also true on the Militarum Tempestus Command Squad's datasheet? So we can kind of expect that this will be the only detachment where we can expect Science to be battle lined going forward, or at least when our codex comes out. That's a guess. That's speculation. Okay, let's talk about our enhancements. So next thing to kind of talk about is the enhancements in Combined Regiment, our index attachment, are pretty bad, right? Like, Grand Strategist was taken fairly often, but it wasn't something that you were super thrilled to take. It was just like, yeah, sure, we got 15 points, we have a bunch of vehicles, we have a tank commander, cool, that works. Um, Kurov's Aquila was seeing a little bit of play. Drill Commander was absolute garbage, useless, and what was the other one? Oh, the Death Mask. It was a great point filler. It did almost nothing. But yeah, so we basically had four or like two worthless stratagems. One that was like kind of funny with the Kurov's Aquila, and then Grand Strategist was like, sure, we have 10 or 15 points. We have a lot of vehicles. Let's go ahead and throw it on a tank commander. But other than that, it just wouldn't really be used. Sometimes you could put it on like a Tempestus Scion commander or officer, Tempestor Prime, and that was okay. We have actually pretty decent stratagem or enhancements coming into this new detachment. So the first one, Bombast class Vox array, 25 points. Put it on a Tempestor Prime. Each time the bearer issues an order, if that bearer's unit contains one of our models equipped with Master Vox, it can issue that order to up to 3 different regiment units instead of only one. This is okay. It's a little bit pricey at 25 points, and the other major thing about it is you have to give the same order to 3 different regiment units. You cannot use this to give, I want them to have take aim, and them to have first rank fire, and them to have move, move, move. No, you have to pick one that goes across everything. And the major thing about this is I'm pretty sure if you do end up taking this, you're going to put it on a Tempestor Prime that is going to start the game on the board because the most valuable time to just give orders to your entire army is going to be like turn one, move, move, move. Kadachan, move, move, move. Kazakin, move, move, move. And you just make all of your infantry move fast at the beginning of the game in order to get them into the places of cover, in order to get them to the places where they really want to go. And this detachment otherwise kind of struggles to have access to those orders because we don't we're not nearly as incentivized to take Lord Solar in this anymore. We don't really have great ways to just like throw orders. There is a world where you can put Creed in a command squad, but we'll get to that towards the end. So this is okay. I think it's a little bit pricey. If it was like 15 points, I think you would take it most of the time. But 25 points, it's like, it's nice. Next one, Priority Drop Beacon, 30 points. Put it on Tempestor Prime. The bearer's unit can be set up using the Deep Strike ability in the reinforcement step of your first, second, or third movement phase, regardless of any mission rules. So this basically just says you can Deep Strike turn one, and that's pretty fun. So um, we'll get to a fun combination with this in a little bit. But this is, I think, really interesting in terms of being able to put pressure on turn one. But most of the time, I think it is really hard to actually use this. But one of the major things that you can do with this is you can just threaten your opponent. Like you hold a gun to their head and be like, I can deep strike you turn one. You better start screening me from deployment phase. And so sometimes you'll get your opponents to like move a little bit farther back in order to make sure that if they go second, you don't just have 15 Scions in their backfield killing off whatever it was that they were planning to like stick their home objective with, for example, or killing like I don't know, a unit like killing a truck or something out from underneath the orcs, right? This is that kind of threat that you can do to force your opponent to respect Deep Strike from the very beginning of the game. But if you have Gaunt's Ghost, this was kind of something that a lot of players were doing anyway. So it's like, it's okay. We'll talk about some of the funny applications in a bit. Shroud Projector, 15 points. Militarum, Tempestus officer model only, Tempestor Primes, and means cannot use the fire Overwatch stratagem to shoot at the bearer's unit. I actually think this might be the best stratagem in the current detachment, and the major reason why is it has a couple of really strong pairings with our stratagems down below, and the other major thing is that um, there are units in the game that if they get a full Overwatch off, like a full unit of Rubrics with Flamers, or GSC Hybrid Acolytes with Flamers, or whatever, the new Flash gets when you put like the Tactical Brigade enhancement on them, um, that can just shred a Scion squad, right? Scions can shred a Scion squad if they get a full Overwatch off. So one of the major things that we would have to do before is you'd have to try and drop Scions such that they were only able to see and be seen by like one of the models that could Overwatch. Like if you trying to drop onto Rubrics, if only the Arcane Vortex like Infernal Master is able to actually Overwatch you, it's probably not worth it. However, now we don't have to do that. Now we do not have to respect their Overwatch with one of our units, and that is really cool. So that is something that's actually really valuable in terms of giving our opponents headaches and kind of turning off their tools. And anytime you can turn off someone's tools, they get I mean, they get kind of upset, right? Like whenever you can't Overwatch, you're just like, that was part of my plan. I was trying to screen you out with all these flamers, and you're like, that's too bad. So I actually think this is something that is close to auto include in any list that we're looking at taking. All right, last one, advanced augury, infantry officer, so it doesn't have to go into a scion. After both players have deployed their army, select up to 3 regiment units from your army and redeploy them. Yeah, this is okay. Like the major problem is that most of the units that you would want to do this on are not regiment. So, eh, right? Like, if you could use this on Gaunt's Ghosts or Ratlings or any other infiltrators, this would actually be pretty good because you can like set up your screens like after you know where all of their nonsense is. Um, yeah, but you can't do it. Gaunt's Ghost, Ratlings, not regiment. Pretty much all of our regiment units that we were taking are either like sitting on our home objective or have scout, so they're just going to push out. So like you also can't do it on like Katachan or Kazakhin while they are in a transport. So like what are you going to do? You're going to be like, oh, I'm going to put these Scions here in the middle, and now we're going to put them back in reserve. Oh my God, that's where they probably should have been in the first place. And the other major one with this is maybe, I think the only major use for this actually is if you were watching like David Gaylord or listen to David Gaylord talk about taking a unit of 3 Scout Sentinels to use them as an Alpha Strike, that is probably the most valuable thing you can do with this. And I think this is probably not the detachment for it. So, like, it is what it is. You don't value this one super highly. But anyway, so we have one that's interesting, one that is very very fun. It is definitely more fun than I think is good, but I think it is still pretty decent. This one I value this one quite a lot. This one I think is almost useless. So, but that's okay. The fact that we go from like 0 good enhancements to like 2.5 good enhancements, pretty good. All right, let's go ahead and talk about our stratagems next. Bellicosa drop. When the reinforcements stop your movement phase, if you have deep strike, you can 6-inch deep strike. Cool. This is cool. So this basically makes all of our scions Aquilons when we want them to be. I played 2 games yesterday actually with a very not optimized list. We'll get to that in a little bit. Where I think I used this once over 2 games, but like it is the fact that it exists as a threat is, I think, generally more valuable than actually having the execution because once your opponent knows this, they should be able to kind of like screen you out with that in mind. Okay, next one, firing hot. Um, your shooting phase, 1 Tempestus or Kazakhin unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot. Till the end of the phase, improve the strength and AP characteristics of hotshot las carbines, hotshot las guns, hotshot las, pretty much everything hotshot. I think there's like one. I think people have mentioned that there's like one sniper in. I think it's the Aquilon sniper, maybe. Does not benefit from this. Um, yeah, it's pretty decent. So the biggest thing that this is valuable for is it makes it so that you can split fire more effectively. So the major thing that this does is your hotshot volley guns go from strength 4 to strength 5, and your hotshot las guns go from strength 3 to strength 4. And then you have +1 to wound. So what this does is it makes your hotshot las guns shooting at Marines. They are now strength 4 with +1 to wound, so they are wounding Marines on 3s and at AP2. And then your hotshot volley guns go from strength 4 to strength 5, which means that they are strength 5 to Marines toughness 4, and then you're +1 to wound, so they are wounding Marines on 2s. So suddenly you're able to just like take this and you can just shoot it into Marines, and all of your las guns are going to do significant damage to that unit suddenly, whereas before they were just they would add a couple of wounds. You would maybe kill like 2. Um, it doesn't really affect our ability to shoot at anything tougher than like Marines or Terminators, but it's okay that way. The major thing that I would look at with this is I would need to do some math, but my expectation is some people have been talking about you take triple volley gun in a unit of Scions and then you just super kill Marines. But my general response to that is, but we're super killing Marines anyway, so like we can do that without paying for stratagem. Um, but the major thing that I think this actually opens up is maybe you take like two volley guns, right? You take five las guns and you take a couple of volley guns. You drop down at a deep strike. You spend this, and you're gonna take like your plasma and your melta guns. They're gonna go that way, and then your volley guns and your las guns are gonna go into the marines. So it allows you to split fire really effectively. It doesn't really help that much against anything tougher. But I think this one is a little bit overrated, but we'll see what ends up working out. If there are like there are some kind of fun things that you can do where you can like make your volley guns hit or wound toughness 8 vehicles on fives instead of sixes because you're now strength 5 with plus 1 to wound. Oh, so you'd be winning them on fours. So it's actually like not bad. But the problem is like going into anything tougher than toughness 9, like it just doesn't do a whole lot. So and it's still just damage 1. You would still just rather have the melt gun at that point. So I think this is cool. I think it opens up split fire, and so maybe your third Scion brick can have volley guns instead of melta guns. Anyway, those are my general thoughts on it. Fire and relocate. Your shooting phase. One Astro Militarium unit that is not Titanic from your army basically gets assault. So they technically don't get the assault keyword, but they can shoot in a turn in which you advanced, and that's awesome. So the major thing about this is it is okay on like Scions and Kazarkin and whatever, but it doesn't say that it's limited to infantry like most things in this detachment. This one can be used for tank commanders and Lehman Russes and whatever you want it to. And that actually makes it really valuable because tank commanders now can move potentially 19 inches and still shoot, which is really, really crazy for a vehicle, especially for a tank. Like most people, like most vehicles can move 10, and sometimes they can like there's a small handful of vehicles that can advance and then shoot. So some things can move 16 and then shoot. We can move 19 and then shoot, which is absolutely ridiculous. Um, Even just being able to move like 10 to 16 and then shoot is really, really good. So this is actually way more relevant for our vehicles than it is for our guys. However, I will say I think of the yeah, I used this once on Kazarkin, and I used this once on um, a tank commander during my game. So the fact the but again, both this and Bellicosa drop are more threatening as threats and just saying like, hey, I can do this. So like whenever like I'm sure you guys have played this, I've seen this plenty of times before. Your opponent will ask, how far does your tank move? And you're like 10, but actually 13. And then our head we're thinking is like, please don't make me move 13. I do not want to move 13 because then I'm hitting on fours. This is the same thing like with these. You don't want to have to spend this, but you have the ability to, and so now your opponent has to respect that. This is a similar thing. Having assault is more valuable than using assault most of the time because your opponent will just kind of like, okay, well, normally move 6 or normally you move 10. I'll assume you can move like 15. And so that way you can only really advance and shoot if you roll like a 6. So, these are more valuable as threats than they are to actually do. All right, next one. Servo designators. Your shooting phase, just after your Astrometar unit has shot, your infantry unit, select one unit hit by one or more of those attacks that is visible to your unit. Until the end of the phase, that enemy unit cannot have the benefit of cover. Okay, so this is okay. The major thing about it is this clause right here. You cannot do it with mortars. Um, but 1 CP, your army ignores cover is not bad. This kind of makes up for not really wanting to run Hellhounds in this detachment. So we do have access to ignore cover, but we don't have access to all the extra AP. Like this is, I think, this and Exterminators are only access to bonus AP. So this is pretty good. Overall, it's just very situational. Um, so yeah, just good. All right. Aerial extraction. This is the stratagem that is going to be core to the gameplay loop of this detachment. When end of your opponent's fight phase, target one Valkyrie unit or one Astro Militarum unit from your army that has deep strike, and all that has to not be within engagement range. Remove your unit from the battlefield and place it into strategic reserves. So, if you have ever played against Host of Ascension or like Grey Knights in general, you will understand why this is really good. So, one of the major things that we would sometimes have problems with when we were playing Scions before is let's say someone deep strikes off into a corner of the map, and we don't have any of our tanks that can get over there that can shoot them. but we need this thing dead. Like, it needs to die. What we would oftentimes do is we would drop a big unit of Scions over there in order to kill it and remove it from the board. However, the problem with that was if your opponent was good, they're basically trading their unit of whatever for our unit of Scions, because now our Scions are going to take a turn or two to get back into the game. That is now no longer an issue. So suddenly, anything that your opponent puts off on like one side of the board that is not being supported by the rest of their army, we go drop and we kill it. And because it's not being supported by the rest of their army, at the end of their turn, we can be like, thank you very much. This unit of Scions is now back in reserve, and also it has +1 to wound again. So, especially if you're trying to play up against something that is much more durable, like Ultramarines Ironstorm, which a lot of people are expecting to be the new detachment in the game, this is very, very powerful because our Scions kind of rely on that +1 to wound in order to be credible threats against vehicles and monsters. But that's really, really powerful. So it actually, the biggest thing about this is it changes how you position your Scions when you drop them fairly substantially, because the major key rider here is not within engagement range. So what you can do before, in general, you're going to want to, if you can keep your Scions completely safe, except for against the thing that they're shooting at, that's generally going to be way better than if you were trying to do it before, where you would kind of hedge your bets, like, hey, I don't think you're going to shoot at these Scions because I'm also presenting like 3 tank commanders that you're going to have to deal with. And it changes the Scions from being like you were wanting to deploy them into the midboard to now the Scions, by default, you want to deploy them much more around the periphery of the board, cutting off different parts of your opponent's army. Other major thing is you can do this for free if you have Ursula Creed. And this one, and that is really valuable. This is really hard to use with Ursula Creed because, one, you're probably going to be far, and two, you can't do it on tanks. This one's okay. You might be able to do it with Creed. This one cannot be done with Creed ever because it is used while you are in reserves, and so Creed is not within 12 inches of things in reserves. This one's okay. You can do it with Creed. But this one, I'm legitimately looking at just running Creed around by herself solo and just advancing her around in order to try and make it possible to do this every turn. In terms of being able to like pick up this unit for free. That's really powerful. Okay. Lastly, on my position, this is not the best stratagem in the detachment, but my favorite stratagem. So this is very conditionally powerful. Very conditionally. So the major reason why it's so conditional is when we can do it, and it is at the end of our opponent's fight phase. We target 1 regiment infantry unit from our army that is within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units. Effect: roll 1d6 for each enemy unit within engagement range of a unit. On a 2+, that enemy unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. This is okay, right? Like, this is totally fine. If you are doing it into 1 unit, it's probably not valuable for the damage you're doing. But if you're doing it into 2 or more units, that is, at that point, that is like a 1 CP double grenade. The downside to this is then your unit suffers 3d3 mortal wounds. And this is not entirely a downside, actually. So the major uses of this are, 1, it discourages your opponent from consolidating in, right? Let's just say your opponent consolidates like his last remaining Exalted 8-bound into a unit of Catachan or whatever. He has already swung, and now he's going into Catachan. And you're like, well, I really do not want to risk failing this leadership check and not being able to fall back from this unit. So you can say 1 CP, I'm going to, 1, try and kill your Exalted 8-bound, and 2, do 3d3 to myself in order to either kill your 8-bound or kill all of my own models that are in engagement range. The second thing that you can do, and something that one of the people in my Discord, Wesley St. Hines, was talking about, was using heroic interventions. So the major thing that you can do with this, I probably had a chance to do this in my games. I didn't even think about it. But one of the things that you can do is, because it's during your opponent's fight phase, if your opponent charges whatever, and you have like a unit of Death Corps of Krieg, you countercharge, you heroic intervention, and you tag the thing you need to. But if your unit is kind of strung out and can't all base, you get a free move with that heroic intervention, and you can just get into a ton of other things and pile into like their vehicles or whatever. And by doing this, you can do two things. One, you can use on my position to hit multiple things with the mortal wound. So let's just say, you could charge over on one side, you heroic that, but you also go this way and you tag like tank, tank, something like that, right? You on my position, shoot, do D6, 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 do 3D3 to yourself, and the goal with that 3D3 is you just want to tag that that model over there with like one guy or maybe only a couple of guys. You only tag this tank with one guy, tag that tank with one guy. Then when you do 3D3 to yourself, you kill the one thing in engagement range there, the one thing engagement range here, and you try and take yourself out of engagement range with the thing that you originally heroicked. That way, not only have you done D6, 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 but you've also taken yourself out of engagement range so that your unit can act freely on the next turn. Super cool. Very cool stratagem. Very hard to use effectively, but very powerful in the right circumstances. And I love this because it is very lore friendly. Like this is guard's equivalent of Kareen, where it will not come up very often, but when it does, it's super powerful and super iconic. So I really love this stratagem. This is the core gameplay loop. You are going to be trying to do this every turn. The rest of them are just, I mean, they're decent. None of them are bad, but they're all just threats. They're tools in your toolbox. Okay, I want to take you through a couple of games because I did play this recently. So I played this one, and the major thing that I'm kind of finding with this is you just kill infantries. I played against Dan and his custodies yesterday. I was playing in a 2-round Teams RTT where I was coming in basically as a last minute sub, and I just super killed him. Like you just have, he just could not survive just the raw amount of meltoplasma that was coming out. And then I also played up against DJ and his Grey Knight, and so Dan failed like all of his 4-ups, and DJ hit like all of his 4-ups. So that's part of what I think both these are probably supposed to be about like a 15-5 ish, but because DJ hit so many, he actually like nearly tabled me towards the end of the game. Um, and yeah, so this is kind of what it does. But you just kill, like, your plasma and your melta are now wounding terminators and custodies on twos unless they have a -1 to wound, like wardens or paladins. So you just super kill anything in that. And I kind of want to go back because I'm really seeing two general ways that this detachment can be played. So the first one, if you watch David Gaylord, I'll try and throw up a thing to 40k Fireside. Uh, Here, whatever. 40k Fireside. So the basic way to play this is you can kind of look at combined regiment and just do it, but with more scions. Uh, this is you take 2 or 3 tank commanders or tank commander and 2 or 3 Lehman Russes. You take 2 or 3 like 15 bricks of scions. Maybe you put one of them in a Torox Prime, and then you just play some midboard junk, right? Kazarkin, Katachan, and Chimeras, uh, something in Toroxes, whatever. And you can do this, and suddenly you're just kind of playing uh, kind of a battle line, but your scions will be like, okay, but that is dead, and then that is dead, and you just like slice off parts of your opponent's army over the course of the game. And this is, I think, what a lot of people were kind of expecting to see when you actually looked at this, because now that, or because this detachment does not have any like restrictions on you have to take X number of Tempestus units, or you cannot take anything that is not Tempestus or has certain keywords. This is really powerful because it is Tempestus but with tanks, and that is something that has not been true of most Tempestus detachments in the past, where you were limited to like not really taking vehicles. Like you got to take like Toroxes, Torox Primes, and Valkyries, and that was kind of it. And otherwise, you were just spamming Tempestus Scion status sheets. That's not true anymore. And so now that you can take some of the value out of the tanks that we can bring, and the fact that Lehman Russes and tank commanders are just very powerful on their own, you can just play fairly similar to Combined Regiment, but with more of an emphasis on killing the flanks. And I think that's very powerful. That is basically what I did in these two games. So the list that I took was triple tank commander, Ursula Creed, and an infantry squad, two 15-man Scions, one 5-man Scions, three Kazarkin, one Chimera, a Scout Sentinel, oh, and a 20 brick of Krieg with a Marshal. The 20 brick of Krieg I thought was okay. Um, because they are re-rolling hits of ones. They've lost lethal hits, so it's okay. If you can start getting like the extra +1 to hit from the Krieg rule and the +1 to wound from the Krieg rule, then they become better. But you know they're just a brick that is annoying to remove more than anything else. Uh, but yeah, the biggest thing that you can do with all that is you just come in and you slice off parts of your opponent's army. Um, yeah. So the other way that you can play this is infantry spam. So one of the major things that if you've already seen, I will throw it up on screen once again. Wesley St. Hines, I did an interview with him where he was talking about playing all infantry. That list is really really good now. When you were taking combined regiment, you were only really killing all of your opponent's small things, and you would just play a scoring game across the entire thing. You can still do that, but now your Scions will kill tanks. Like if you were watching his video talking about how like he doesn't do any damage to like demons, he does now. He does do damage to demons now. So all of his what do you call it? All of his big guns were really, or the special weapons are going to kill the Greater Unclean One. They're going to kill um, the Repulsor Executioner. You are going to be able to deal with these threats now by just having a lot of guys. Now, that one is a little bit tougher for a lot of, especially newer players, to kind of pivot to, just because most people don't have 40 to 50 Catty-chan, 30 Kazarkin, 60 to 75 Scions, and then a couple of like other things that are just kind of hanging out. That is not something that a lot of people can just instantly pivot to. But if you are a guard player who is interested in playing that infantry horde again, this is the way to do it. So in general, let's go ahead and talk about all of this. I think the Wesley St. Hines list in this detachment might be one of the best armies in the game, simply because it is going to be playing in a way that not a lot of other detachments or other tournament armies are going to be playing, because we are expecting there to be a lot of Ultramarines, Ironstorm, Star Shatter Arsenal, Necrons, and probably like maybe Biosanctic GSC are probably going to be still good, or some version of GSC. And the major thing that this does is, one, we have way more OC than any of them. And also, we have way more scalpel tools than our opponents will, because Scions will just kill, okay, I don't care about that flank. You can have your tanks over in that corner. Cool. I'm going to kill the one tank that can threaten my natural expansion, or I'm going to kill the one tank that is threatening my threatening the middle. I'm going to outscore you on primary, and because I have more things than you, I'm also going to outscore you on secondary. And so that's part of why, like, when Wesley was talking about his game, he was consistently scoring 100s, or like 90 plus in almost all of his games. This army can do that. And if the rest of the meta is being pushed towards, like, whole spam, the infantry spam guard is not going to be teched for. There's not going to be enough attacks in the game when people are taking las cannons and melta guns in order to try and kill vehicles. Because if you have like an eradicator squad which has like 10 melta shots or whatever, that can at best kill 10 guardsmen and is way more likely to kill 6 to 8 of them, which is that's not even full killing a squad, right? Like, we are suddenly at a spot where we are just having way too many bodies for people to deal with, way too much OC for people to deal with. The other list, the basic, like the one that David Gaylord was talking about with like multiple tank commanders and um, just taking like a couple units of Scions and then just like midboard gum, the more traditional way of thinking of like this is what combined regiment would do if it just like had, if like this was combined regiment. I think that is going to be an incredibly powerful teams list. The Wesley St. Hines infantry spam looks very good singles and teams, but I think that the list that David was talking about is insane in teams, because it will run over anything that is not whole spam. And it still has game into things that are whole spam, because we can shift over to a more scoring game and just kind of hide from our opponent's guns for a lot of the game. Either way, they're both very strong. I'm curious what you guys are thinking about this. I'm going to be playing a little bit more of this because, one, it's new. I'm excited about new things, especially since it is powerful, right? It's not. I don't think the lists that people are generally going to be bringing are going to be oppressive, but I do think there are ways to play this that are oppressive across the entire meta. So it looks very good overall. But anyway, let me know how your games have gone so far with the new what's it called Bridgehead Strike, and we'll go ahead and see what the rest of it looks like going forward. For now, though, this has been Josh Joshi Howard. We've been talking about this whole Bridgehead Strike thing, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.